Welcome to the Fast Draw Live here on CBS News Live Feed, our live streaming channel, which you can find on your affiliate site, Ustream, or of course, cbsnews.com. Today, we're chatting about how the recession affects baby names. We know the recession has its varied effects, whether it's hemlines going up, candy and lipstick sales going up, or the sale of luxury items going down. So now, let's take a fast draw look at the trends in baby naming.
During a recession, you might think that baby names are like spending habits, restrained, careful, serious.
But today's baby names are just the opposite. They're exotic, bold, and even a little glamorous, as if hoping for a better tomorrow.
Let's go back to the Great Depression. After the stock market crash, safe, conservative classic names like John, Mary, James, Elizabeth also crashed. People were disillusioned with the status quo.
So what names did well during the Great Depression? For the answer, just look at an industry that did well: entertainment.
Boys' names became fun and energetic. Jackie, Jimmy, Bobby. And they reflected famous movie stars of the time. Gary.
As in Gary Cooper.
And Ronald.
After Ronald Coleman, girls' names were even more glamorous. Marlena.
Dietrich.
Carol.
Lombard.
Joan.
Crawford.
From the big screen to the cradle. And today?
Well, just like during the Depression, today's tough times make for flashy names. Baby name author Laura Wattenberg looked at 50 old traditional names and found all but 4 of them declined last year.
Names used to be more of a personal choice, where we look to our own family and our own culture. Parents today approach the choice of a name almost like marketers naming a product. They're trying to launch that child into the global marketplace and have them stand out.
The top 100 rising names are now exotic and bold. London, Genesis, and Valentina for girls. Cash with a K, Valentino, and Riker for boys.
And they reflect the glow of Hollywood and, like it or not, reality TV. Audrina
from the TV show The Hills,
and Chloe
with a K, like Khloe Kardashian,
are skyrocketing. Heard of Miley Cyrus, also known as Hannah Montana? You'll be hearing the name Miley a lot more in the future.
Miley, by the way, belongs to one of the most quickly rising groups of names, something called the Smiley family. Miley, Marley, Kaylee. When you say these names, you can't help but smile. Miley.
It's as if parents somehow know, despite the economy, they are free to choose names that inspire feelings of fame, glamour, and success.
Because no matter how tight the times, an exotic, glamorous baby name doesn't cost a dime.
And now we are joined by Fast Draw co-creator Josh Landis.
Hello.
So the takeaway there is that basically a glamorous baby name is a free way to feel better in a recession.
It's one of the ways, baby names are all about aspirations that parents have for their kids. So in a time of recession, I guess it's what people look forward to, not what they're feeling today, which was kind of the recession takeaway. Hollywood obviously has an influence on that. It's where we look to forget our troubles, where we look to have inspiration. But an interesting thing, first of all, this is a topic that never got old. Like, I never got tired of researching this. I could be on the computer right now.
I can't imagine you searching baby names all day.
I know, you would never imagine it, but it's like for someone who's kind of a data junkie like me and like a statistician geek like me, I loved it. One of the things, though, that jumped out at me that was interesting concerning Hollywood was horror movies. Now, you would think that horror movies, these are negative stories, terrible things happen.
Connotation.
Yes, terrible things happen, people do awful things, but they actually influence baby names.
Really? Give me some examples.
Well, the thing is it's not movies that star that feature adult terrible villains, I guess, for lack of a better word. Okay. So like Freddy Krueger, not going to be an influence there. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What about the little girl in the ring?
The little girl in the ring, I don't know, but other little kids like Damien, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, Friday the 13th. So I just have the dates here. So The Omen came out in 1976. The name Damien, which was from that movie, rose in popularity.
Yeah, you're right. You wouldn't think someone would want the correlation. I wonder if it's subconscious or they actually recognize that they're getting this name from a horror movie.
It's one of the things that it didn't make sense to me because if you look at Rosemary's Baby, Adrian was that baby's name. That name that came out in 1968. The popularity of that name went up. The Exorcist in 1973, Regan, which was with the character there, that name shot up, and Gage, less well known the kind of character, but Pet Sematary, and I think it was 89. The name Gage became popular after that. So it's odd. I don't know why parents do that, but there is definitely a connection. There's also a connection with real life crimes, which is also surprising to me.
Oh,
but
really?
but three big names that have risen in the recent years is Kaylee, Lacey, and Natalie.
Anthony, Lacey Peterson,
Yeah,
Natalie
and Natalie Holloway. These names have
That
all
is
grown
so
in popularity,
interesting.
even though these were all victims of murder. So you
That's
wouldn't think
right.
that parents would name their kids after murder victims, but in these cases, because now this is again, it's the caveat. They're kids, or they're pregnant women, or they're somehow the sympathetic.
Some sympathy, right?
I think that's a sympathy factor.
Right. Sympathy, or even just familiarity. You start to hear these names over and over. You hear Kaylee Anthony on the news every day for months. Maybe it's just the familiarity even.
Definitely familiarity. I think there is a sympathy thing there because you feel for these people, so you develop an emotional attachment to these names and these people. And one more thing on the kind of the real life, factors. Hurricanes is a similar thing too, where hurricanes influence baby names.
We have more Katrinas running around right now.
I think there was a bump in Katrinas, but again, this is one of those things where hurricanes are destructive, are more bad than good, and some of them influence baby names choices, and some don't. So what the research shows is that if the name is doesn't have the popular characteristics of the day, the hurricane won't help. So Wilma, 2005, didn't do much. Floyd, 1999,
Right.
Nobody's going to name their kid Floyd. Gertrude, in 74, these were names that didn't.
Yeah, that's my great grandma's name.
Right. So that says a lot about the era that name was popular in. So, it's those names didn't take a hit, but didn't get a bump. But Andrew in 92, Alicia in 1983, and Hurricane Camille in 1969, all of those hurricanes triggered an increase in the names of those babies.
Very interesting. Yeah, I was surprised too, though. I mean, because it seems like the purpose of a lot of this is to be unique. And as you mentioned, it's about branding and creating kind of a baby as a product. And when you look at the stars, I mean, they do rename themselves. Clay Aiken, for example, was originally named Clayton Holmes Grissom, or Jennifer Aniston was Jennifer Lynn Anastasia Kiss. I can't even say her original name.
Right.
And so, or Demi Moore, Demetria Jean Gynes. It's, in a way, people are trying to name their kids something that they won't have to change down the road that is catchy from the start.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I hadn't thought about that, people renaming themselves in the tradition of branding, and it does seem to carry over to Hollywood. I mean, this is just from memory. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Cary Grant was born Archibald Leach.
Completely different?
Completely different. I know that Jon Stewart was born with a different name. Larry King was born with a different name. There's a lot of people who reinvented themselves. Even Jim McKay, the late Jim McKay, who we remember, he was McManus, and he renamed himself McKay, or someone who had been working with him early in his career, but his real name was McManus, which now Sean McManus has the original name, who never changed his name. So another example of that.
But also, when you look at it, it seems like people are just simplifying it. Maybe sometimes they think that it's part of the branding is something shorter and easier. When you look at people actually changing their names, it's almost always, when I look down the list of Hollywood names, for example, they almost always are shorter, simpler, easier to spell, easier to say.
Right. Definitely. I mean, they're also more memorable. But you pointed out something before. You were looking at the top rising names, and you had an observation that you made.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting because the most popular emerging names, for example, for boys in 2008, Aiden and Caden are two names I had never even heard of 2 years ago, and already they're in the top 5, most popular emerging names for 2008. So it's just interesting how quickly something can kind of catch steam, even if it started out unique. It quickly kind of loses that uniqueness when everyone starts doing it.
Exactly. It's kind of a case of collective individuality, I guess you could call it. Laura Wattenberg, who is at thebabynamewizard.com, who
You're
is
expert in the piece?
the expert in the piece, who's just really was incredible, just knows every facet of the names. And she says that we're now living in what she calls the age of Aiden. And if you look at the names of, like you pointed out, Aiden, but even beyond that, Braden, Caden, Jaden, basically put any consonant in front of Aiden, and it's practically a name. And she says that is what parents, may not realize. They think they're being unique because they say, oh, we like Jaden, but we're going to spell it Jaydn, or Jadyn, or Jadin.
You're right. That's the other confusing thing is we have all these different variations of how to spell names nowadays.
You'll have like 5 different ways of spelling the same name. So the parents think that they're being unique because, I don't know anyone with Jadyn, but the reality is when you say Jaden, it's going to sound the same. So,
Right.
and she says that right now that's the phenomenon in the boys' names. There are now 40 boys' names that are somehow Aiden in them, which makes up about 4% of the boys' names, which is stratospheric.
But then it becomes just more complicated because instead of John, everyone knows how to spell John. Well, I guess could have an H or not. But now you have to then explain how to spell Aiden. I know with Cali, there are about 5 different ways to spell Cali,
Right.
and so
Now,
it's
where
the
does
same
Cali
thing.
come from?
It's the first 4 letters of California because my mom's best friend in high school was Callie Sutter, and her dad was homesick for California, so he named her Callie. So I'm indirectly short for California.
That's a great origin. No, that's unique.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before.
No, but now there are more Callies running around now. In fact, I noticed on the list it crept up to 53, so it's moving up. I noticed we have a chat room question.
We do have a chat room question, and to remind the other viewers, if they want to log into Ustream.tv, they can ask their own questions in the chat room.
Absolutely. Little Ustream TV pitch. Go to the CBS News live channel on Ustream if you want to ask a question.
And the question we have up for us now, the News Chica wants to know, did you discover any examples of presidents influencing baby names in certain years?
Actually, yes, definitely. Presidents did influence baby names. Actually, it's an interesting thing. Roughly before Watergate, people named kids after presidents, taking the last name of the president, making a first name, like Kennedy or a Johnson.
Reagan, we see even.
Reagan, yeah. So before Watergate, they did it kind of concurrently with the term. What they do today is they tend to wait until the president's out of office until they give them that name. So it's a little bit of a delayed reaction, but it's still happening. So names like Clinton, Carter, Reagan. There's a number of things that are happening like that. We haven't seen an effect on Barack or Obama, partly because he's still in office, but also because it is such a different name. It's not like a name like Carter, which pre-existed, and it could give a lift in popularity because you had a president named Carter, but definitely.
I would be shocked, though, if we didn't see a lot more Baracks and Obamas running around 10 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be an effect.
Absolutely. I've even noticed, schools, obviously we're talking baby names, but there have already been several schools who have renamed themselves after Obama, and he's in his first few months of office.
Right.
So.
Yeah, still it remains to be seen how history will remember him. So they're being pretty optimistic on their renaming. But it's interesting because we think about names as being traditional and reflecting a cultural history, and they are and they do, but they also are influenced by a larger group mentality that we don't often realize. And so in your case, I think it's probably different because you have a specific origin for your name, and it's a good thing you weren't born in somewhere like Arkansas or Kansas. No offense to those places, but calling you Ark or Can would be weird. It wouldn't be as nice as Cali. But yeah, these things are influencing us every turn of the way. So people think they're unique, and they are, but they're also influenced.
Right. Along that line, though, you mentioned that there's a difference kind of in the trend of urban naming and rural naming of just kind of where people derive names from.
Yes. I was looking for what is most influential in terms of what makes us name our kids what we name them. And, family origin, obviously that's a big part of it. But I was thinking, does it north, south, east, west, all these things. And really what became dominant was rural, sparsely populated area versus dense urban populations. And the trend there is that in rural places, people are more likely to pick new names, invent new names, and this is where we create new names. Things like Gunner, Cody, Logan, things that were, names that kind of came out of nowhere when they were first started and have since become more popular. In urban areas and more dense areas, densely populated areas, you have people who still want to be unique, but they don't want to be so different. So they're kind of combing through all of the old traditional names, trying to pick out some gem that was forgotten, kind of behind, so that you see
create
names.
Their own revival of some
Exactly,
names.
you get a revival of names. So you see that, in New York, you see a lot of these kind of Victorian era names and these kind of revival that like a very
Grace
pretty.
and Genevieve.
Exactly, all of these. I don't know them off the top of my head, but if you look, in these areas, you definitely see trends, and that's another thing.
Urban versus the rural. Very interesting. Well, I know that this was your first Father's Day.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how did you go with your baby? Did you pick something classic, unique?
Well, we picked a classic name, and I have to say, after the research that I'm just as susceptible to the forces,
did it make
I
you
guess.
rethink?
It definitely made me rethink. We actually picked the name Amelia, which was my wife's great grandmother. So it's
a family ties.
It's a family tie, so it's a family name. But when I spoke to Laura Wattenberg at the babynamewizard.com, she pointed out that that's a great great reason to name after an ancestor, but if you look at your name, it starts with a vowel, it ends in a vowel. That's very common these days, like Emma, Isabella, like these are things. It's got a lot of vowels and very few consonants, which is also a trend. And if you look at the number one name, which is Emma, I don't want to, she said this to me, I don't want to, kind of rain on your parade, but,
It's a little
Amelia,
late now.
right, but Amelia is really a variation on Emma, Emma, Amelia. You may think Amelia is completely different from Emma, and it looks like it, and in your mind you think it is, but...
You still have your unique spin. I
Yes.
have to disagree with
Right. I have, that's our story, and we're sticking to it. And no, we picked that name long before she was born. So was it a unique choice, or was it influenced by culture? Definitely
Kind of
both.
all of the above,
Yeah,
right?
definitely both.
Absolutely.
And the one thing that when you look at over the years, the thing that I thought was also very interesting is rankings. And we look today, I know what we did. We looked at the site and we said, oh, we like this name, Emma. If we would have thought about Emma and seen it at number one, we would have said, no, we're not going to pick the number one name because you don't want
to be the number
right.
one name.
Again, it goes back to the branding of individuality. But if you look back in time, the number one name today, Emma, if you go back 50 years, the number of people named Emma, that number of names would have been number 22. So there's so much more diversity. So just because you're number 10, it doesn't mean it's as
Doesn't mean
popular.
you're going to have 3 other kids in the classroom
Right.
named
So that's
that.
something
The
for
pie is
parents to
being cut
remember.
up more. You're right. That's a good point. Don't be intimidated by the name being in the top 10 or
Exactly,
15.
exactly.
We have another question from the chat room.
Yes. How do athletes inspire baby names?
Wow.
Any correlation
And
there?
Athletes
Did you
inspire.
look
You know
at
what?
athletes?
I did not. I would have to say. My guess would be that if it's a good athlete who is does great things, that then and if the name fits the conventions of the day, I think it would probably influence. But again, I would say check out babynamewizard.com. Laura Wattenberg, she has a blog there, and she's got all kinds of little nuggets there. You could probably even post a question, email her and ask her, because she would be able to know. But yeah, that's a really good question.
That is. My own anecdotal note, I remember I was inspired by a BYU, I went to BYU, Cougars, and there's a BYU quarterback named Tyler, and I talked my mom into naming my baby brother Tyler because I liked that name. So
There you go.
there's an anecdotal inspiration by an athlete's name. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Josh Landis.
My pleasure.
Thank you, all of you, for joining us on the Fast Draw Live here on CBSNews.com. You can join us every Wednesday morning at 10:30 when we roll out the latest Fast Draw creation. I don't know what we want to call your spectaculars.
Animated spectacular is what we'll call it. And you can follow us on Twitter, and also at CBS News we have our own blog.
And you can even download them off of iTunes.
iTunes, yes, on iTunes, on YouTube.
Look for the Fast Draw everywhere. Thank you again, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon on CBSNews.com.